Lots of you. Piles of you. Before he starts, if you haven't made the connection yet, cross-examination can and should be done from the points you are planning to make. And it's as simple as taking your bullet point, your premise, and saying, would you agree with me that premise? With one big asterisk there. Usually your premise at the high level is really big. So you need to break it down into small pieces. So for example, if my premise is that epidemic, let me actually stand right there for a second. My premise is that epidemics and epidemiology are the reason that private property rights need to go to the wayside for needs of the public. That is my big premise. Watch me explore it with a bunch of tiny bullet points. Hi.
Hello.
Would you agree with me that anthrax is frightening?
Yes.
And Ebola too, like actually melting, your body melting into blood is really scary as a thing, right?
Yes.
Would you agree with me that synthetic biology, which has mutated Ebola for 50, 60 years inside of a laboratory, is even more scary?
Yes.
It's because we don't have any antidotes, right?
Yes.
Now, isn't it true that in 9/11 there was an anthrax attack?
I'm not sure.
You're not sure on that? How about the mail interception that happened on 9/11 where they sorted through all kinds of package for chemical attack? Do you remember that?
Well, actually, at the time I was only one, so I don't remember specifically, but I have heard about that, yes.
Okay. Now, notice I already know that that's going to be roughly her answer because of how she answered the anthrax question. But what am I doing?
You're providing more information to the judge.
And
I don't care what she says. I'm not actually doing that. I'm never trying to make someone look bad intentionally. I am making her look bad, but I'm not trying to. Instead, I'm just trying to communicate to my judge.
Right.
So all I'm doing is reminding them that even though she doesn't agree that it existed, I don't care if she agrees or not. You know it happened. And so watch this. Let's suppose that there was a chemical attack on 9/11 and the government sorted all of our mail to try and stop anthrax from going to congressional people's offices. Would you agree with me that generally speaking that would be illegal?
yes.
Would you agree with me that mail is private property?
Yes.
And that transit of mail is typically a highly protected event?
Yes.
Okay. Now, let's take the example of an outbreak. Would you agree with me that if Ebola breaks out, the government is probably going to quarantine areas of breakout?
Yes.
Okay? Would you agree with me that that could mean leaving your property?
Yes.
Would you agree it could mean washing down your property? Would you agree it could mean taking your property?
I don't know how that.
Like what if your property was thought to be contaminated?
Why would they take it if they could clean it out? Why would they have to take it after that?
Have you ever heard of cleaning Ebola out of a car?
No.
Oh, convenient. Let's go talk about mad cow disease for a second. Now, isn't it true that mad cow disease is a frightening disease?
Yes.
Because, well, actually let's talk about in England. In England, there was a mad cow disease outbreak, and they ended up killing over 500,000 cows first, and then 2 million cows later, and it cost $5 billion in total. Would you agree with me that a lot of people lost their private property?
Yes.
Would you also agree with me that probably a lot of people did not lose their lives?
Yes.
Now, do you guys see what's happening? She's become a puppet. I'm communicating via cross-examination. That's all that I'm trying to say. So, epidemics, I've broken it down into little pieces. That's what we're trying to do in cross-examination.
Wouldn't you agree that people getting sick is bad?
Yes.
And if we can stop people from getting sick, shouldn't we try to? Isn't that our moral responsibility?
Yes.
Now, if we can show that studies can clearly link BPA to people getting sick, shouldn't we ban BPA because it is clearly linked to creating sickness within people?
That had 2 premises in it. Isn't it such a thing that can be banned? Can we detect it?
Okay.
Then,
Okay. Now, isn't it true that we can actually ban BPA? the bisphenol that's in plastics.
Yes.
Now, if we can clearly prove that BPA is toxic, shouldn't we ban it?
If we can clearly prove it.
Okay, and if we ban BPA, wouldn't that stop people from getting sick because of BPA?
No.
Why wouldn't it stop people from getting sick if we ban the source of their sickness?
BPA comes in a lot of different ways, and even if you ban the production of it now, it may be able to still reach them in different ways.
And what are
Good
the,
use of the mysterious no.
and what are those different ways that it reaches people?
Well, if it's already been in production, you can't exactly make sure that every single piece of plastic has been recalled from every single pump. So if it's still out there, it can still cause future issues.
Now, can we stop the problem from further persisting in the future?
Yeah, I want you to adjust your questioning. You're questioning her by not looking at her, but it's very much, you're creating a dialogue between the two of you.
Okay.
I want you to include the whole audience here. You'll find yourself pausing just a little more before you ask your next question.
Okay. So isn't it true that if we can stop the problem from persisting in the future, that we should?
Yes.
Okay, and now by banning BPA, we would stop the problem.
Ask this person the question.
Okay. Now by banning BPA, would we stop the problem from happening in the future?
No.
Now ask this person the next question.
Now, why would we stop the problem if we ban the problem?
Because there's still things out there, and that still affects the future, even if there's no current supply.
So it's your view that if there's a problem and we can't completely solve the problem, just let the problem persist?
I didn't say that.
Well, isn't that what you're saying by not banning BPA, because there's a problem that we can't completely solve, we can only partly solve?
If we can prove that it is the cause of the problem.
So if we can
Okay, stop. When we have identified the crux of our disagreement, we move on. And we could have identified this about 4 questions ago. What is the crux of your disagreement?
is banning BPA the solution to the problem?
No. What is the crux of their disagreement?
Is banning BPA going to stop the harms from happening or not?
I think it's a lot closer because of how she answered the why question, but I would say that that's not even the crux. It's one step back from that.
BPA is a problem?
Has she ever agreed that BPA is dangerous?
No.
What did she say?
If.
If. She has agreed to, in the logic chain, if BPA is dangerous, then. Conclusion. It's that right there that she hasn't agreed to. And that's fine. He established the rest of it, I think, well enough, and all of us answered rightly in our minds what we would do, but our minds aren't convinced yet that BPA is dangerous. In cross-examination, you don't have to establish that. That's his next speech, in my opinion. Good job.
Thanks.
You're up. Yeah. Yay! Does anyone in here have 3 major bullet points and then a couple of minor bullet points? Just curious. I'm going to give you a new word. We want to ask lines of questions. This is what a lawyer would call it. When I was cross-examining a minute ago about epidemics, I had 1 line of questions. And in that line, I had examples of 3 different types of epidemics: mad cow disease, anthrax, and Ebola. And underneath that, I had a lot of tiny questions. That's 1 line of questions. In cross-examination, how many lines of questions do you think you should plan on getting through? What? 1 to 3. 1 to 3 lines of questions. Yes?
What happens when you're asking the questions and the other person wants to go on and on about it and you don't get through your line of questions? How do you stop it?
I'm hoping an example emerges. If it doesn't, let's back to that question. Okay, go ahead.
So just use the one we prepared. Yeah.
Do you agree that social sustainability should be valued highest?
It depends on what else is out there.
Let him know what side he's on of the resolution.
Yeah, I don't do all these stuff.
I did once long ago.
Yeah, that's true. That was 2 years ago, so a long time.
Are you acting?
Yeah.
You're for needs of the public, right? You're for private property owners. That's all you need. Okay, keep going.
Do you believe that public needs matter?
I'd say they do these.
We don't want to ask, do you believe questions. There are two reasons for it. One, because some debaters are just pedantic and they'll say, this isn't a debate about what I believe or not. And you're like, for the purposes of the debate round. But that's one reason. But the second is because it's not a leading question. We want to put the claim in the round. Do you agree with me that? Do it again.
Do you agree with me that the public needs are important?
Yes, to a certain extent.
Do you believe that, or do you agree that social sustainability is important?
Again, to a certain extent.
What is that extent?
You'd have to weigh a lot of options. I mean, you can't just completely have social sustainability. People have different definitions of what is social sustainability. You know, there's different definitions. You have to zero in on the definition and see how that plays out in the bigger picture.
Now what just happened?
He just allowed the opposition to basically undermine this whole case.
Because opposition used mysterious no by saying, to an extent,
Right.
period. And that's perfect. It's not quibbling. So far we haven't had, like people are already getting this, I think, which is why we haven't had a super frustrating answer yet. Instead of, well, to a certain extent, because you'd have to consider all of the factors and the definitions of what is this and what is that. He just said to an extent, and this guy had to ask why. Very nice answer.
So, do you believe that highways are?
Do you agree?
Do you agree that highways are a public need?
Yes.
No further questions.
When do you think you established free speech? What is your case?
Social sustainability.
Social sustainability. And what's an example in your case?
Someone's farm getting divided in half for a freeway.
And you're going to say that that is good?
It's not my case.
Okay, that's fine. Then you can put this down. Good job. Actually, stay up here. So if you don't know your point, you won't be able to get all that far. And that's okay because you didn't know the cases. Next person. Yeah. Come on. Tell him what side he's on.
All right, you are on the negative side of the UTV resolution. All right, so can you agree with me that these are...
Okay, stop. We don't ever start speeches or cross-examinations with, all right. Again.
Can you agree with me that bee populations in the U.S. are currently experiencing something called colony collapse disorder?
Can you explain the colony collapse?
All right, so can we agree that massive amounts of bee populations in the U.S. are currently experiencing large declines? These are dying and we don't know why.
I believe so.
All right.
Okay,
So,
no. Did you know he already didn't know? Based on your first question.
Mhm.
You already knew he didn't know. Did you all see what I did when she didn't know? What did I do that was a little different than what he just did?
You asked a different question that allowed you to explain more about it, so you had more time to talk about the specific.
Whoever else said it was actually right. I informed. You don't have to only ask questions in cross-examination. You can say, given this situation, or given that fact. So he could say, if he did it right, because this is a risky gray area of cross-examination. What's the current state of bee population in the United States?
They're going down.
How fast?
About like, don't know the exact numbers.
If we had some fact here, it would help us, because we could say, now given that the bee population is declining by 56% over the last 10 years, and then ask our question. So we don't have to say, wouldn't you agree with me that the bee population is declining by 56% over the last 10 years? He doesn't know. I already know he doesn't know. We just say it. This happened. And then we ask a question about it. Just like I said, mad cow disease killed this many cows. Would you agree with me that that was a taking of private property to kill all those cows? So we insert facts. But if you go on, then everybody's like, that's not a cross-examination, and they get mad at you, and rightly so. So learning to use judgment to insert a little fact and then ask a question about it is the exercise. But I even said things like, Time Magazine reported that this. What do you think about that? And so I'm actually inserting my evidence into the round. Not with a complete citation and quotation, but the basic idea of it. And then we're talking about it. That is the only thing to do. Carry on.
All right. So given that bees were just recently placed on the endangered species list in the United States, can you agree that the bee population in the U.S. is in serious trouble?
Yes.
Nailed it. Do you see that? He didn't ask, can't we agree that they're very nice.
All right. Can we agree that bees are used to pollinate many different crops in the United States?
Yes.
All right. And given that, well, I didn't start the presentation. And can we agree that, and given that almonds are one of these crops that bees pollinates, then we can say that the almond crop in the U.S. is dependent on the bee population, correct?
I believe so.
Okay, so given that the U.S. almond crop forms about 70% of the world's almond crop total, then the decline of bee population in the U.S. is thus going to affect the entire world. Correct?
Yes.
All right. And so if
Now, I have one minor modification, but I really like what he's doing. He put fact in, and then he asks a question and says correct with a question mark. He is phrasing it like a claim, correct, question mark. But I don't think that's as effective, because we don't yet know what type of question it is. It works for a dialogue, but not with the audience. We should instead start with, would you agree that, or isn't it true that? It's the same way of sticking correct at the end of a sentence, except at the beginning, so that the claim is what is featured. So you would say the same thing, given that it affects, 70% of the almonds are from the United States, and that bees significantly affect the amount of almonds. Wouldn't you agree with me that bees are directly related to international almond supply? You see that that's different? It's a minor difference, but it's a good one. Keep going.
would you agree with me that there are many different types of pesticides in the United States?
Yes.
And can we also agree that many of those pesticides overlap with each other? That you can use one type of pesticide on a certain type of crop, but you can just as easily use another pesticide on that same plant?
Yes.
All right, so if a farmer stopped using a certain pesticide, he could just as easily use another pesticide to replace the one he stopped using.
Yes.
No further questions?
Good job. I really like how he broke it down. How many lines of questions total would you say you have?
On my paper, or that I remember,
That actually happened.
3.
I would have thought 2, but 3 is fine. In his mind, I think pesticides one is its own. So he's accomplished in about 3 minutes, 1 to 3 lines of cross-examination. Do you see how powerful that is for his speech? What's your next speech going to be?
Talking about how bees are dying and bees are good, and that the farmers can just as easily use other pesticides.
It's like the only thing left for me to prove is that there are alternative pesticides, because everything else we've agreed to.
Well, wouldn't you want to say that my opponent start off the speech just saying, my opponent agrees with me in these following areas,
Yes.
establish that groundwork, and
Yes.
then move on.
It's very persuasive to your audience and debaters. I know this sounds weird because you think of debate as a fight. It's not. Your audience is always struggling because both sides usually have something of merit. And acknowledging that is persuasive. It is more persuasive rather than less persuasive to say they had a really good point about this. And so what Mike is suggesting is incredible for starting a speech. Let's go over our common ground. Both of us agree on some really key points. This, and this. And that makes the audience feel like everybody is part of some same thing. And it makes them feel safe and ready to hear you about the next thing, because you're acknowledging common ground and strengths of your opponent. It's highly persuasive. Who's next? Yes, sir.
So I find as a judge, so I think it's very effective, but I also find I don't like it as a judge because it seems like you're trying to go down a single path of basically boxing someone in, and there's no real discovery there, right? Especially when you throw out, here's a fact. Well, your opponent doesn't make your case, especially TP, right? So if I throw a fact of bees or pollination of BPA, asking them like, well, they're saying yes or no, but they really have no expertise in this area. So I don't find it very valuable as a judge when I hear someone pontificating during process, just asking for yes or no. Am I wrong that way, or should I be looking at it differently?
I think you should be looking at it differently, which is what we're learning here as a form. But mid-round, the assumptions aren't going to just be your case. So the assumptions are going to be compare and contrast between disadvantages and advantages. And so I think you're going to find, if I ran a disadvantage that food prices go up, then this cross-examination would have been about comparing and contrasting whether the food prices have to go up due to other types of available pesticides. And that would have been interesting to you because it would have been the controversy, right? The form that we're learning here is how to address that. But we're not starting mid-round, and so you're not getting the benefit of that as a judge. But I don't think I know, because this is the way to cross-examine in an interesting way, in an engaging way to your audiences. Okay. One thing that I would also say is the reason that I'm doing it this way is because what I find I'm correct in some particular thing, which is I find that most high school debaters can't use their cross-examination time. And what we've just demonstrated, they don't even realize it yet. They could talk for 12 minutes if they wanted to. And we don't even know what the last speaker said, because there isn't one. We're starting around the way. And so, yeah, so my goals here I think are a little different. Are you guys starting to see that I don't even plan my cross-examinations. I was known in high school for just having a discussion. Because I know my 1 point, or my 2 points. And my mind is working. Bullet point, sub, example, in the phrasing of a question. And audiences find that entertaining, engaging, and you can just go on forever if you're cross-examining about your case in the next speech. But to your point, it's got to be customized to the round. And so just hearing someone cross-examine about aren't public needs important is boring to go. Okay, who's next? Yellow.
Okay, so you need to ask for the needs of the public.
So I'm arguing for
Yes. We have Mr. Private Property Rights is cross-examining.
Would you agree that there needs to be a healthy economy?
Yes, a healthy economy is very important for a country.
And would you agree that businesses drive the economy?
In most cases, yes.
And would you agree that private property rights helps creativity?
What exactly do you mean by that?
So would you agree that by inventing products helps the creativity of a company?
Inventing products helps the creativity of a company?
Yes.
I'm not sure exactly the connection between creating a new product and sparking creativity at a company.
Okay. So would you agree that creativity promotes innovation?
Creativity and innovation are practically the same thing, so yes.
Okay. And would you agree that private property rights promotes privacy for either businesses or for an individual?
Private property rights promote privacy?
Yes.
Yes, you have the right to have privacy on your private property.
No further questions.
Okay, now, I want you to do it over. Here's what happens in this cross-examination. We have theoretical statements, they're called abstractions. Lots of theoretical privacy relates to private property and innovation and creativity, but we're not thinking of a specific image in our mind. This is Western thinking versus Eastern thinking. And the best debaters put everything into a picture that stands for the whole. Stop whispering, it's really frustrating to me. So you put it into a picture that stands for the entirety. Let me give you an example. Who or what is God? Describe God. And a Westerner tends to say, well, he's perfect, just, noble, merciful. These are abstractions. They don't mean a specific image. What is an image of that? If you ask a Jew, who or what is God? God is my rock. He is my shepherd. Those are images. Now they don't fully describe, and that's what an abstract does. An abstract tries to fully describe. But in a debate, we need to be concrete so that it can be remembered. So watch this. Isn't it true that when Apple creates a new product, first there's an idea in somebody's mind?
Yes.
And then they express that idea, let's say a new iPhone or a new, the first time they came up with iPod, by probably drawing it out, a picture of an iPod on a computer.
Yeah.
Would you agree with me that that computer is that person's personal property or the company's property?
Yes.
Would you also agree with me that the idea of the iPod, before it ever comes alive, is a form of property?
Yes.
Don't we call that intellectual property?
Yes.
Would you agree with me that intellectual property is the basis of innovation?
Not necessarily, no.
Okay. Would you agree with me that if your ideas can't be your ideas, at least the incentive to have ideas goes down?
A little bit, yes.
For example, it would be tough to create an iPod company as not Apple if Apple could look at that and say, I will build many iPods faster than you and ship them. It would be kind of a disincentive for getting into your iPod business, right?
Yes.
So if there's a competitor that can take your idea and build it faster because they have more resources, would you agree that that tends to harm innovation?
For the smaller company, yes.
Right. Thanks. Now, do you guys see, I'm not saying that's brilliant. I'm trying to say that's what he was saying. Creativity and innovation. But we're talking about specific creations in specific companies, a large company, a small company, and what happens to them. That's creating an image. And we want to stick the image into the cross-examination because then you remember it. Next time, and at the end of the cross-examination, I started saying abstractions. I can now say intellectual property because when I say intellectual property, you have an image of a guy designing an iPod on a computer. So next time I say intellectual property, that's what you think. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to plant images before abstracting, not the other way around. Am I making sense? Okay. Would you like to try again? Sure. I would like to. Yeah, go ahead.
So start from the top.
Yep.
Okay. Now, would you agree that there needs to be a healthy economy?
For healthy economy is very important, yes.
And would you agree that these private businesses drive the economy?
Private businesses are the economy, yes.
Okay. And would you agree that these intellectual property rights are the creativity of these businesses?
What exactly do you mean by that?
So these private property rights, would you agree that these products that these businesses have are the incentive for the businesses to create?
So we're still in abstraction. Starting from the very beginning, even private companies are the economy. Where are you really going with that?
Well, in my case, I was giving little examples of private businesses, bringing some evidence of private businesses driving the economy. And I was using an example of Plymouth Plantation of how William Bradford was using the idea of everyone producing for everyone's business, everyone, but then he realized that was a failure, and then he came up with another idea saying that everyone has their own private property rights, and he realized that that was beneficial for their small government or small economy that he had.
Okay, so I think that's a speech time to develop one, but watch me do something similar with an example. We just need to name specific products and companies is all I'm after.
Okay.
Or examples of them. Famous ones, common ones. So I'm going to try and show the abstraction that private companies are the foundation of economic success. Would you agree with me that you don't like going to the DMV?
Yes.
You know, I don't either. Because the DMV, they don't actually have a business model as far as I know of. Like, they don't go out of business or not, right?
Yes, they're a governmental organization.
And there's no real competitor to the DMV, right?
Yes.
And would you agree with me that even the DMV doesn't really, we don't even know if it makes enough money to fund itself, right?
Yes.
So in no way, shape, or form is the DMV a business.
Correct.
And would you agree with me that there are hundreds of thousands of government jobs?
Yes.
Isn't it true that private companies that are businesses tend to generate the revenues that pay for public organizations?
Yes, they're called taxes.
And would you agree with me then that even though economic activity could appear to be happening, we should probably see it from the private businesses are what generate it all?
The economic activity appears to be happening, so there isn't really economic activity in our economy.
Okay. Isn't it true that if we didn't have the private businesses and we just had government organizations, we probably would have a weaker economy?
Yes.
For example, there are some governments in the world that try to organize the economy top-down, right?
Yes.
For example, China, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, would you agree with me that the United States has tried to have a bottom-up approach to the economy?
Yes.
Where private businesses, everybody from train companies to Microsoft, they're the ones who are the economy, so to speak, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I'm not saying that again, I don't know how that really connects to the whole debate round. But if we want our judges to feel anything from cross-examination, we have to spend the time talking through. Because just watch, if I just add it, no matter what I say, just say yes, okay? If I have a pure abstraction, it doesn't do anything. Would you agree with me that private companies are the building block of an economy?
Yes.
Moving on. While that may be what I want, it doesn't do anything because the judges aren't actually persuaded because they're not thinking of anything. It's a negotiation we had, and it's just not persuasive. Am I making sense?
Yes.
Okay, do you want to try one more time?
Yes, please. Okay, let's take an example of the private businesses creating a product for the public needs. Would you agree that the government is in the way of private businesses to produce a product for the needs of the public?
No, I'd have to see a specific example when that happened to agree to that. I believe that the government in general promotes products that serve the public.
Could you give an instance of a government promoting a product for the needs of the public?
The government allows hospitals to be built.
Now, would you agree that hospitals could also be run by private organizations?
Most hospitals are run by private organizations.
Okay. Now, let's take an example of China. How they don't allow private property for individuals. Would you agree that the government of China is doesn't allow these governments or doesn't allow businesses to have the incentive to produce inventions?
I'd have to look more into that in order to make an informed answer on that question.
I can just say I'm not sure. So now, I know it feels like less, but I want everyone to realize that this was the actual meat of the discussion. When you have an abstract agreement, that doesn't mean you gained any ground, because when it came to the actual debate, you would use the China example and whatever medicine example. He doesn't even agree. And so in the actual debate round, this would all come out. So we have to get to the substance of our position and realize, oh, it's not as strong as I thought. There actually is room to disagree with me about hospitals, but we have to talk about the hospitals to find it. Or else it's just going to hit us in the next rebuttal speech. That all that stuff we glossed over abstractly in cross-examination, when we connect it to concrete things, my opponent doesn't agree with me anymore. Shoot. And so maybe our cross-examination feels less glorious, but we discover the actual controversy between the two opponents. And that's good. Good job. Suzanne. You just have to know one idea to cross-examine.
Who's ready?
Representing your partner.
They are one of
Alright. Okay, so we're on the side that private property should be above public use property. So you're the. So, would you agree that people can be corrupt and self-seeking?
They could be.
Ask the audience.
Would you agree that the politicians can be corrupt and self-seeking?
It depends on the politician, I'm guessing. And it depends on what type of politician. It just depends.
Would you agree that President Obama can be corrupt and self-seeking?
I am not sure.
Would you agree that in the past there's ever been corruption or self-seeking in the government?
Ask the audience.
Would you agree that in the past there's ever been corruption or self-seeking in the government?
In what circumstance?
In circumstances of where money's involved.
So when your foot is open to him and your shoulder is open to him, and if you just close them off, okay, your foot this way and your shoulder that way, you'll stop looking at him. Yeah.
Would you agree that in the past, and let me give an example. If someone has, if you own a piece of property and it's worth $500,000, and the government wants to build a freeway there, and they are going to take the property from you and give you $100,000, is there corruption in that? Would you be happy with that?
I would, yeah, but
So you would be happy if you have a property worth $500,000 and the government takes it so they can build a freeway that pays you $100,000.
well, it's the need of the public, and by taking on the private property with just with like building something like a highway or something for the need of the public. So I see that there is a need for taking the private property for the need of the public.
Okay, now we're going to pause for a second, because thankfully finally we have the answer. He's doing godly debatory stuff. Is what he's saying persuasive to us?
It's not logical.
Not one bit.
No.
So now the temptation, though, is for the answer to keep saying, for real?
I like the video.
Seriously?
I like the video, right?
Yeah, the video. And instead, you should be like, boom, inside. You're like, yes! That's how I feel when somebody says something unreasonable. I'm going to move on.
Okay.
Because I don't want it to get any better for them. And I don't want to get mad at myself. And I know my entire audience has answered the question in their own mind. The government giving me $100,000 for a $500,000 piece of property is unjust, outrageous, and wrong. And he is. Like, leave it there.
Wouldn't you sometimes ask it twice like he did,
Yeah,
just
I
to
think
make sure?
of confirmation, because sometimes the debater can think, but maybe he just misunderstood.
Yeah.
Maybe your question wasn't as clear as you thought. So the one confirmation is good, but to keep beating on it is not.
Well, you run the risk, though, if you ask a second question, to allow him to dig out of the hole, which you may not want to do.
But
what about when they
answer
answer?
is what if he digs out of the hole in the speech? And he says, that's not really what I thought he meant when he asked me that question. And that's the importance of the confirmation.
So what about when they answer like that? Because sometimes people will be very evasive in debate.
Yes.
And then if I, as the cross-exer, say, interesting. Is that okay, or is that
It's
rude?
okay. I don't think it's rude.
Or what's a good way to answer when he says, yeah, I think that's fair?
Yeah, see, it comes down to different personalities. So I remember in finals at Nationals 1 year, the guy at the ship showed you the other day, he was very unassuming. He had this reductio ad absurdum argument where he was like, and so you wouldn't give it this, and this, and this, and he came down to, so to save a life, you wouldn't think the government should even give a penny. And the person said, that's right. And so he leaned into the microphone. He had a whole minute and a half of cross-ex time left. But he knew he had just won the round right there. He leaned into the microphone and said, wow. And he walked away. The audience roared and clapped. And I had never seen, from that moment on, they won like the audience over. Every speech, they were even interrupted 4 or 5 times for applause and laughter, which never, and they won 7-0. Like, that doesn't happen usually in the finals. But if Isaiah McPeak, dark personality, he just says something crazy. Wow. Every mom here is like, you're so mean. And I'm done. So it comes down to feeling the moment, and that's a very tough judgment call. And that's why I love cross-ex, to learn that. Do you have more?
No, that's about it, I guess. I was going to summarize it with, if you had answered logically and fairly, he's being unfair. He's picking on me.
So he assumed that this cross-elimination line would go like this,
Yeah, exactly.
but in reality, it went like that. And what we can't do is assume that it went the way we planned it, which one of the earlier cross-examiners did after discovering a disagreement, and they kept going. We can't stick to our script, but we can enjoy and relish this moment. Because we know why we chose our direction, and we're very confident we can prove it in the speech, and they just take it, they don't have the ability to stand on that.
Right.
So, very
So how would you end it? If he's kind of got me off track, go
go to the next line of questions.
Okay.
And you don't have to answers. Good job! Yeah. I'm going to take one turn answering just to be a little more frustrating so we can deal with some typical stuff, okay?
No, you should ask Mr. Parsons.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. We'll see if I get a chance to be frustrated. I mean, yeah.
So this is the TV, so you're on neg, so make sure you stay as not correct.
Okay, and what's your case?
My case restaurant and you manage to get a deadly disease from your food, would that bother you?
That's why I don't eat there.
So it wouldn't bother you if you went into a place that you trusted and got a deadly bacteria?
The reason I trust them is because they probably won't do that.
So you do not believe that the food supply should be protected?
I don't see any reason to add protections that we don't already have. Now, is that typical representation of a frustrating debater?
Yeah.
Is it very persuasive?
No, it doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't really make sense, but sometimes it works because we don't know what to do with it.
Yes.
Okay? So, switch places. What was your first question?
Would you agree that the food supply is something that must be protected?
Would you agree with me that the food supply is something that must be protected?
I'm not sure.
Well, let's think about it a little bit then. Let's just say that we're importing a bunch of grain from Africa. Isn't it true that inside of that grain could be deadly diseases?
I'm sure they would have checked before bringing it over.
But it is true that there could be such diseases, right?
There is a possibility.
And what if we are exchanging meat products with Japan? They're sending us a bunch of tuna, okay, for our sushi. Isn't it possible that that tuna could be old?
They tend to have higher food quality standards than we do.
By the time it got here, it could be old though, right?
No, they send it on express. I have checked.
I got you. Let's talk about another kind of food then, since you're a sushi person. I'm curious about, I'm trying to think of something that we would import from Russia, and all I can come up with is vodka. So, would you agree with me that we have some, have you ever seen that vodka that has a worm in it?
I can't say I have, considering that I'm a minor.
Well, isn't that tequila? No, I don't know, there's probably tequila like that too. Now, would you agree with me that that seems to pose some health risk?
Yes, quite possibly.
Now, my last question for you is this. When it comes to all kinds of products being imported and exported and moving around and making its way to our homes and dinner tables and restaurants, would you agree with me that the organization most well equipped to inspect and regulate that food supply is the federal government?
Yes.
Thank you. Do you see what I did? What did I do? Somebody's got to help me here. Because it
Personal.
You gave examples, and you also gave examples that she couldn't have a kind of like a prepared answer to. Because she's a minor, she wouldn't have any experience.
I didn't choose that for that reason.
So, okay, but you also had you had examples that are clearly issues, and also you made it less personal to here. You made it imports and exports as opposed to being.
So those are all correct observations, but I want you to find the tactic, not the information. The tactic that I used to break down a frustrating answer.
You created pictures that the audience and judges could decide for themselves regardless what she said.
Exactly. I created images and broke the question into sub-bullets, and my mind immediately went to about 4 sub-bullets. And then the way she answered my first one, I broke that one into sub-bullets, and that's where we spent all of our time. Was these little examples, and you're exactly right. I do not care what she says. Not one bit. And she realizes, this is the most interesting thing. When a debater is frustrating, they tend to be frustrating in the abstract. The second you start talking about an example, they're less frustrating. That's not always true, because they can do this. Let's switch back again. Keep cross-examining me.
I tried to make it not abstract. I tried to use an actual example. I mean, that didn't work.
Okay,
Just start with the same question again.
I don't care. Just keep going.
Would you agree that bacteria in the food supply is dangerous?
You'd have to have evidence to prove that.
No, how do you...
Try doing what I did. Break it down and break down that assumption. This is a meta assumption.
Would you agree that E. coli, we have found bacteria bacteria of E. coli in hamburgers and food, would you agree that that is dangerous?
I'm not sure how often you find that. Don't get frustrated.
Chipotle, talk about Chipotle.
Guys, here's, Mackenzie's getting frustrated with me.
I'm not getting frustrated by my own lack of finding it. Way to go.
Okay. You should, oh, this is great. He is digging his own grave. If I could just keep a smile on my face. Keep going.
Do you agree that Salmonella and E. coli are deadly bacteria?
I'm not a scientist.
Given that both have been found to kill several hundred people per year, would you agree that they are deadly bacteria?
You didn't prove any evidence to support that. Am I credible, not credible?
Not credible.
Should I just move on?
Yeah,
Just move.
because we already agreed.
Or could you ask, are you wearing clothes right now?
It fits your personality.
Because what they would be doing, my thought is you get them out of the debate round and
Right.
just ask personal questions to get them back into the area of reasonableness. So you say, are you wearing clothes? If you need evidence for everything, every question that you're going to answer, obviously you're not going to answer that question by saying there's no evidence of that, or I can't answer that question. So you go all the way back to the beginning and something like, are we in a debate round?
That's
Are
exactly what you do. So you are going to the next part of one of the asking principles, which is you need to create a rhythm. And when someone is frustrated, you can tell within the first two questions, are they going to be frustrated? And sometimes their reputation precedes them. You know you are at maximum going to get one line of questions. But you start doing what Mike did, which is you start with a definition of debate. You start with, there are two sides. You start with their side is this, my side is this. You get to a point where you're trying to create, lawyers call it a rhythm of yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And then you move into more substantial argument. But they have to drop their guard. And so what you're doing is you're creating I'm not here to hurt you, which you're actually not. Because cross-examination is primarily about finding agreement, not disagreement. It's not just, you're going to say, I have to have evidence for whatever I'm going to say, okay? So isn't it true that E. coli and Salmonella are some of the most dangerous things that can enter a food supply?
I would have to have evidence for that.
Interesting. Have to have evidence. Would you agree that evidence is a form of support for an argument? Or do I have to have evidence for that too? And I start enjoying my conversation.
Logically, yes.
Do you have evidence for logic supporting your position?
Logic would be its own form of evidence.
Ah, good. I'm glad we agree on that. So now, wouldn't you agree that it's logically true that some food goes bad?
Yes.
And when that food goes bad, sometimes it can create disease if you eat it. True?
You have no statistics for this.
But it can happen, can't it?
Yes.
And when it happens, and you're sick, you're probably mad, right?
That's not what everyone would react.
So if you bought food that was contaminated, you wouldn't be upset at the person who sold that food to you.
No, I'm sure they had no idea.
You'd just be kicking yourself for not smelling it before you cook it.
But they can't check everything.
Do you see me having an innocuous conversation? I just don't care. But I'm slowly going to drip towards stuff. So, if you could prevent yourself from getting sick, you probably would be smart to do so, right?
Yes.
Would you agree with me that sometimes some people can't prevent, like maybe the food is already cooked so you can't smell it? Does that ever happen?
Yes.
Okay. And in those cases, you'd agree with me that some businesses can even profit off of selling you bad
That would be illegal. They wouldn't do that.
But if they did, they'd make some money, wouldn't they?
You've given me no evidence for this.
I know I'm not giving you evidence that it happened. I'm just asking if they could sell food that was supposed to not be sold, and you paid money for it. Don't they turn a profit?
Yes.
Do you see what I'm doing? It's just breaking it into the smallest possible pieces I can think of and using her own words back against her. I am not buying into the I have to have evidence assumption, but yet we're still talking about all the issues because I'm making it little tiny pictures. All right, do you have more cross-ex? Go. Go ahead. All right, we'll go back to you.
You guys are the same question again.
Okay.
Would you agree that the food supply is something that must be protected?
You'd have to have evidence for that.
All right, let's try a different approach. Do you eat food?
Now and then,
Do you prefer to know that your food will not hurt you?
I don't really think about it.
Would you agree that it is important for food to sustain you?
You eat to live, sure.
So if this food did you harm, it would not be serving the purpose of food.
Well, you might still be sustained. You just smile inside and have fun.
Would you want to eat food that makes you sick?
Would you want to eat food that made you sick?
No, I try to avoid that.
So it would be important to avoid these foods that would make you sick.
I don't know how important, I don't get sick that often.
Would you eat something that you knew would make you sick and possibly kill you?
It depends on how much someone was paying me.
So would you pay someone for food that would possibly kill you?
Probably not. You're doing good. I'm just trying to be a dork, right? This is what debaters do, is they hear your question and they reach to some bizarre conclusion, but internally it's not consistent with their position. They're saying stuff, and you are ignoring it and continuing plodding along. And as long as you do that with a smile on your face, I keep digging my own grave, and you can have fun instead of feel pressured by it. Because do you think you could probably sit down right now and win the entire debate round? In fact, this is why I like Parley. I don't think you need cross-ex. I really love it. It's one of my favorite parts of debate. But do you think you could win a debate round with no cross-ex? Yeah, you have a decent case. You have a decent position. You don't need it. So when it becomes clear as day that you don't share the common assumption that today we're going to cover some ground, enjoy the moment. Because your judge is in the room, and they want to enjoy the moment, and they already can see that it's going to be an unreasonable moment. So have some fun with it, or sit down. It doesn't hurt you. Not one little bit. All right, good job. You're doing it. Yay! You're here. I'm gonna get to the loopy now.
Would you agree with me that the agriculture industry in the United States is really important?
Yes, it is important.
Would you agree with me that crops grow, that bugs influence how crops grow when they pollinate them?
Yes.
I love that picture.
Okay. So you would agree with me that the pollination of crops is necessary for our ecosystem?
Yes.
And you would agree with me that our ecosystem influences our agriculture industry?
Yes, and some.
So you would agree with me that if there is a decline of a certain bug, that might influence our agriculture industry?
I would need evidence on that specific insect.
So basically we just talked about how bugs influence the ecosystem, and the ecosystem influences the agriculture industry, correct?
Correct.
So again, if a certain bug declined, that might influence the agriculture industry.
Possibly.
Okay, so if a certain bug declined, that could possibly influence the agriculture industry?
Yes.
Okay, would you agree with me that bees are a popular bug?
Yes, they are a popular bug.
Popular
Right now.
bug.
Would you agree with
Why do you agree to this? Say what you really think.
Popular does not make sense in that context.
Would you agree with me that there are a lot of bees in the United States?
Yes.
Would you agree with me that bees pollinate plants?
Yes.
So you would agree with me that bees can pollinate crops?
Yes.
Okay, so say the bee population declines, would you believe or would you agree with me that that would affect our crops and in turn our agriculture?
Yes.
Okay, given that the bee population is declining in the United States today, would you believe it is reasonable to try and help that bee population not decline anymore?
I would need evidence to support that they were disappearing, that the bees were disappearing.
Okay, given that as we know that bees are disappearing around the world, would you believe that it is reasonable to try and make it so they don't disappear anymore?
Yes.
Okay, I have no further questions.
Okay, now I want you to do some of the same line with me, and I'm going to answer with a picture. Your answers were not bad. But now we're going to flip from asking with pictures. We can actually answer with pictures ourselves. Can somebody maybe sit down here? When someone asks me some bizarre question about military policy, I think of a specific military interaction. I think of a boat off the coast of North Korea or something like that. When someone asks me about the courtroom, I think of actual lawyers, bailiffs, juries, witnesses. I'm creating the image in my mind and running their case through that image. So your cross-ex over. Sure, yep.
Okay, would you agree, I don't know, right? Would you
Start over.
agree with me that bugs can pollinate plants?
They can.
Would you agree with me that certain bugs pollinate certain crops?
I have no idea.
Okay, so do you believe that a crop such as corn, in order to grow, has to have its seeds spread?
Yes, seeds have to spread.
Okay, and would you agree with me that bugs in themselves can also carry seeds from certain crops?
It'd be a big bug to carry a corn.
Not the entire seed, not the entire corn crop, of course, but the way that it creates another corn crop.
Which is not through the seeds, also known as popcorn kernels.
Again, would you agree with me that, this going back further, would you agree with me that bees pollinate flowers?
They do.
Would you agree with me then that bees are important for flowers to grow?
Yes.
Okay, so in turn, do you believe that certain bugs can pollinate certain crops, making it so that they can grow?
I don't know what I believe about the bug pollination of specific crops. I'm sorry.
Okay, given that bees do pollinate certain crops, do you think it's important to protect them?
Given that bees pollinate certain crops, I don't know which crops other than flowers, but if flowers are important to you, bees are probably important to you. So.
Given that bees do pollinate certain agricultural crops, such as corn and wheat, do you think it's important to make sure that they keep doing that?
You have to weigh it against all the other consequences.
Okay, do you have such consequences in mind?
Yeah, I mean, you can take the flower, that whatever buds, turn it upside down and shake it. Like, I mean, they put pesticides off of planes. There are probably lots of ways to get your crops pollinated without using scary bees, which are my number one fear in life.
Okay, so just because bees are your number one fear, you wouldn't mind if they all disappeared?
No, I frequently pray for the absence of bees because they are always flying down my shirt and stinging me 5 times while I'm reading a book, stinging my ear in the middle of a soccer field, getting inside my mouth and stinging me inside the roof of my mouth. I'm petrified of bees and I want them to all die.
None of that sounds pleasant to me either. But would you agree that certain bugs have their purpose?
Yes, mosquitoes too.
Yes.
See, every time she asks me something, I'm trying to process it as fast as possible and come up with an image. Certain bugs have their purpose is abstract. Yeah, mosquitoes. Okay, keep going.
Okay. Would you agree with me that bugs are important in supporting the ecosystem?
Sure.
Okay. And you would agree that that ecosystem, if it's supported will benefit our agriculture industry?
I'm sure it benefits it. To what extent, I don't know.
Okay, so you believe that if something benefits our agriculture, would you agree with me that if something benefits our agriculture industry, we should protect it?
Like pesticides, yes.
Okay, would you agree with me that pesticides have certain chemicals in them?
Of course, that's what makes them work.
Yes. Would you agree with me that sometimes certain chemicals can have damaging effects sometimes?
That's also what makes them work.
Yes. Would you agree with me that sometimes those damaging effects can do more than what the original purpose was? Say that damaging effect would maybe kill certain bees or get into humans' systems.
I would not be surprised if pesticides killed bugs.
Well, yes, that is their intended purpose. But would it be damaging if, say, that certain pesticide maybe got into a human's body system?
That is a nice long chain of thinking, but of course it would be if that was a terrible pesticide and it was in a concentrated enough amount in a food product that got inside of me, then I could die. However, that's probably not in the best interest of the farmers spraying pesticides on their crops so that they can sell them to human beings who will eat them. So, was there a clear winner in that cross-examination? I don't think so.
I was just curious if she should have stopped sooner, because in the beginning, it seemed like she really made a lot of headway. The
Yeah.
longer she went,
Yeah.
she dug,
I think, we got to a certain point where you could see, I'm not going to budge. And she knows, okay, so I just have to come up here and prove the importance of these bees. And that it is cost effective to stop using pesticides and use bees. But I have inserted to all of you, I've seeded some doubt, which is that even though I had a very ridiculous example, you all started to think, oh, yeah, farmers probably could come up with other innovative ways to pollinate their crops than bees. Are any of you thinking that? Like, there's probably some other way to do it than having bees fly around. That is all that I tried to seed in your mind by creating some stupid image of shaking a flower or spitting it out of an airplane, right? And so we're at parity on that issue. And so we walked away with some areas where we agree and disagree, and that is a fine outcome of process. But did you guys see how to answer with pictures? And how fun it is? It's an entertaining way to do it. Good job. You stay here. I need some loopy. Man. Okay. Is she against that? The singer is anti-music. Okay, go.
Would you agree that music can benefit society?
Good.
For instance, contrasting rap and heavy metal to classical music, which one might
You see Dan with his feet and shoulders.
behavior better?
I don't listen to rap or classical music.
Okay. So, if you're in a store, would you agree that some music makes you want to stay in there versus get out?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Name a specific store.
How about if you're shopping in Hobby Lobby, is that a store that you'd like being in compared to Target?
I don't go to either Hobby Lobby or Target often, so I don't have a good point mechanism to compare their music.
I'd like to. I guess my main point was just, would you agree that music is could be influential to behavior?
Have you ever been to Chipotle Mexican Grill
Yes, I have.
and not died because of their meat, right?
Yes.
Now, their music, Chipotle Mexican Grill, would you agree? They have a very interesting playlist. It's like da-da-da-da-da, and there's weird songs you've never heard of.
Yeah, I would. Most of the time we go in and we get it to go and leave, so I don't spend a lot of time listening to their music, but sure.
That's exactly the point. It's so interesting. So isn't it true that some music can actually influence the tempo that you live life by?
Well, no, the reason why I got it to go is because I had somewhere else to be, not because I didn't like it.
I see. see. Now, you've probably never had like a dinner time date on a beach with a ukulele guy, but let's assume, no, the ukulele guy is beside the date, okay? So, and he's playing ukulele. Would you think that that's going to be a fast song that he's playing right then, or would you agree with me it's probably a slow song that he's playing?
It could be either one, but it might be a slow song.
Because the speed of the music around us, doesn't it influence what we do?
It doesn't, I don't think it directly influences, but it may be a determining factor, but I don't think it's the main influence at all.
Okay, and what do you listen to instead?
I don't listen to music myself.
Great, thanks. What does our audience think right now?
She doesn't know.
What?
She doesn't know music.
And?
And so she can't come up, or she will not have a good opinion or viewpoint because she doesn't know anything about music, is the way you're coming across.
See, I still think, I don't think you're wrong, but I think thinking of cross-examination as what did she think is still a mistake. We're not trying to discredit her. Instead, I think the audience thinks, oh yeah, music is pretty influential. And thinking about setting a mood somewhere. That's all. And that's what I needed. Right? Alright, good job. You can answer it. Somebody at this table, right? Somebody at this table. Mouse table. We're cross-examining her.
Yes.
Thing we've been doing for the last hour. Yes. Oh, I was about to be like, okay, so she knows what she's really talking about.
Alright, so.
Okay, so he's on side private property.
Yes.
You are private property, she is needs of the public are more important than that.
Alright, so would
Okay.
you agree, sorry.
Go ahead.
So would you agree that human well-being is important?
Yes.
And is it important that we prioritize our goals to keep the citizens of the nation safe?
Isn't it? When you say is it, that's open-ended. When you say isn't it, you reveal your opinion.
Right. Isn't it important to keep all the citizens in the state safe?
Yes, it is.
All right. And would you say that eminent domain is a public need?
Would you agree?
Would
What
you?
you say is open-ended. We don't know what your opinion is.
All right. Would you agree that eminent domain is a public need?
Can you define eminent domain?
A right to take away a person's property within just jurisdiction.
Don't ask me, it's your
What
question.
jurisdiction?
Depends on the word just, if I think it's just.
All right, so I'll give you an example. For an example, the United States-Mexico border, they took that away. However, it was private property, but then they took it away and now it's not. And by that, eminent domain was used. Would you agree that that is a public need?
In the specific instance of the Mexico border, I do agree with that.
Okay, now, I like the example, but I want to see that example inserted into the round in a way that the audience feels it. I think it's 5 or 7 questions.
So re-ask it?
Yeah, re-ask it, break it down into tiny pieces.
Okay, so would you agree that if somebody took away private property along the United States-Mexico border, that that is a public need?
Okay. You have to think a little analogically here. What's the public need? Immigration, right? Isn't it true that immigration is controlled by governments?
Yes.
Would you agree with me that one of the largest spots of immigration in the United States is our southern border with Mexico?
Yes.
Isn't it true that the area, the land of Texas that borders Mexico, most of that used to be private property?
Right.
Would you agree with me that when the government sets up border walls and border activities, they probably need some space to do that on, like some physical space, some land.
Yes, I would.
Isn't it true that the way the government gets land is it says, give us the land, here's some money.
Probably so.
We call that eminent domain. Would you agree with me that in this case of the southern border, the United States probably should use eminent domain?
I do agree with that.
Thanks. It's the same exact thing that you got, which was really awesome. But we have to break it in pieces so the audience participates in the conclusion. You try. Copy me if you need.
Okay, alright, so, if somebody needs land and then they take it away for an important reason like transportation, would you agree that that is a public need?
Just, you got, if they're taking a land for a public need, like transportation isn't a public need, just say, isn't transportation a public need? Would you agree with me on that?
Okay. Would you agree that transportation is a public need?
Yes, I would.
Alright, and,
How does transportation happen?
okay.
Don't move to the next question. I'm trying to teach you that you had a question with multiple clauses in it.
Alright, so then how does transportation occur? I asked him that.
All right, let's back up to the logic of the question. So the question that you originally asked was, isn't eminent domain used for public needs like transportation or something like that? I just want each of those three to be its own question. Isn't transportation a public need?
Yes.
Would you agree with me that to have transportation you need roads?
Yes.
And to have roads you have to take people's property so you can build the road?
Yes.
That's eminent domain, right? It's the same question, but break it down for each one.
Alright, so, would you agree that transportation is a public need?
Yes, I would.
And in order to get transportation, we would have to take away somebody's private property, correct? Alright, so then that, you would agree that that is called eminent domain, and it is a public need.
Yes.
Okay, that's better. Yeah.
Alright, you would agree that everyone needs water, correct?
Everyone needs water?
Yes.
Yes, I would agree with this.
Alright, and you would agree that not everyone in the world has access to clean water.
I agree with that as well.
Okay, so then if you would agree that if everyone needs clean water in order to be healthy, then you would agree that they are holding up human dignity, correct?
Everyone does need water.
If you were looking at the audience's faces right now, you would see all of us being like, huh? And you would say,
everyone does need water to be healthy, but other than that, I don't really get what else.
and you would just say, I do not get that question. Like you would have license to say that if you would look at all of our faces. And we would have all been like, thank you for acknowledging what we're all feeling. So there's a book called Progressions of a Public Speaker by Scott Perky, and he talks about the issue that when someone is on a stage, they control the room. So I've learned you can rearrange a room once you have the stage, even if the organizers told you not to. You can tell them to change the lights, turn up and down the air. In fact, everybody expects you to. I was once on a stage and somebody walked in and a dog ran through. Like I was teaching to a group 3 times this size, and a dog just busted into the church, ran, and then ran right out. And so there's this moment where what do as a speaker? And the answer is, you say, wow, there was a dog in here. And then the entire audience roared in laughter, but that's not a funny thing to say. But it's because there's a tension built up of everybody's like, there's a dog in here, and somebody has to say it, and it has to be you. And so if you're in cross-examination and you see all of our faces go, huh? She just said something crazy. It had like roads to philosophy in one question. You get every right to say, that doesn't make sense to me. And everybody's actually going to laugh. Not because what you said is funny, but because you spoke for them. That is some really deep stuff right there, by the way. That is advanced. Go ahead.
Okay, and you would agree that without people, water would die? healing water.
That water isn't good for you.
No, like if people die, then it's not good for healing.
Correct.
Okay, what I want you to do here is have fun, like what I just said. So you would agree, so, water, what was the first name of the mistake?
You would agree that everybody.
Without
Water
people,
without
without people, water would die.
Watch me handle this, and then do the whole thing. Do it. The accident. Here's how I would answer it.
Alright, so you would agree that water with people would die? Or some people
No,
would
without
die?
people, water would
Okay,
die.
so you would agree that without people, water would die?
Death to water. Most of you as debaters would say, I don't think that's what you meant. Or correct them in some way. You can enjoy the moment though, and enjoy it all without mocking them too badly. Like saying death to water doesn't hurt them. You're not accusing them of anything. You're just acknowledging the fun of the mistake. All right, keep going. Keep cross-examining me on this point.
Oh, that's all I have though.
No, what you asked him.
Oh,
Already.
So, if you would agree that people need water, so without water people die, and that is not good for human well-being, correct?
That is a parched and nasty duck, yes.